Okay, while that's uploading, I'm assuming you can hear me okay. I think one of the important things with this particular webinar today, given that we've only got a small group as well, is that if you really want to ask any questions at any time, please feel free to just interject at any time. Don't wait for me necessarily to ask if there are any questions. If there's something I talk about you don't particularly agree with, or you want further information, please feel free just to shout out at any time. Okay. So are you happy for me to start? Yeah? Yep. Everyone can hear me. Good. It's like being on hospital radio or something. It's quite strange. I don't know who I'm talking to there. Okay. So really the purpose of today is to look at the impact that retailers are having from a processor's perspective, but also to have a bit of a look back down the chain as well and see where some of the requirements are actually impacting on producers back on the farm and the rest of the supply chain. So we're all aware that global food companies have a greater degree of attention to animal welfare issues. And this has been driven by a variety of factors, things like investment concerns. So organisations that are putting investment into agriculture, they want to be confident that animal welfare issues have been considered and well managed. Things like scares like the horse meat scare in 2013, things are bringing it to the forefront and into the media spotlight. And then, of course, there's the increasing interest from a consumer's perspective. Consumers are becoming a lot more aware of they're becoming a lot more concerned about where their food comes from, and that's obviously having an impact on how retailers develop and implement their standards. So now really is to provide an insight into where those retailer standards have come from, and really to highlight any areas where they're having a big impact on the processes and what we can really do about that impact and how we can best manage it. Okay, so a little bit about me, really just to highlight where I'm coming from in terms of this particular webinar. Obviously, my background is in animal welfare research with a strong focus on looking at the supply chain, particularly transport, stunning and slaughter. But put in a good position to look at the retailer's perspective is in my involvement in the audit industry. So I've spent a fair bit of time representing various retailers, all animal welfare standards around the world. So I've actually seen how standards are implemented in different environments, in different industries, within different countries. So hopefully that will enable me to answer some of the questions that you might have in this regard. So to start out, we really need to think about the consumer, who the consumer is, and what really drives their choice in terms of a product. What makes them select a particular piece of meat off the shelf in the supermarket? And it's important we look at this background information to understand the development of the retailer standards and where they've come from. So let's a little bit about the basics of meat purchasing. So the consumer makes a choice based on the information that they're provided with. Now, if we look at the picture on the slide there, there's with lots of different information when they walk into the shop. Now, the majority of purchasing decisions, the things that ultimately determine the meat they choose, is really how it looks, so how it's on the shelf, and the price. And most people will make their choice based on those two issues. We like that it's something different, that they're looking for the provenance of the product, or they're looking for particular well attributes of the product. but the basics, it really is how it looks and does it cost. Now, you're there as well about the convenience of the product. So it may be that the consumer has a particular menu in mind or a particular dish in mind when they go into the supermarket. They may have seen something on the television. You've got celebrity chefs that might be cooking beef cheeks or something like that. So that may also guide their decision and their selection of the product. Finally, there may be other underpinning requirements. Things like they may want to be assured that the animals have been treated well and have been humanely slaughtered. So they may be looking for some sort of guidance on the animal welfare provenance or animal welfare standards to which that particular animal has been reared. We need to study a little bit about how the consumer gets that information. So to make that informed choice, we can broadly divide the product characteristics into three categories. So this one you'll see on that list is what we call characteristics. So these are really self-evident characteristics, the ones that the consumer sees at the point of purchase, and the consumer can validate those characteristics before they actually pick the product off the shelf and take it to the till. So things like how it looks in the packet and will it satisfy what they actually want from that particular product. You know, if they want to cook a bolognese, does it enable them to cook a bolognese? So it's the things that they can actually validate by looking at the product on the shelf. So looking at the product itself rather than any labelling information. Then we have what's called the experience characteristics, and these are not really evident before the consumer product, but they're discovered once the consumer has consumed the product. So it's things like taste, how well it's cooked, the convenience of the product. It doesn't necessarily influence that first choice, but it will influence any subsequent purchases. So if it meets their expectations, the time they go into the supermarket, they won't pick that product again. And finally, it's a category called the credence characteristics. These are really things that we can only discover if we use adequate labelling. So it's things like the animal welfare origin, the standards to which the animals have been produced, production methods, and things like biological safety, you know, things like the use-by date or the best before date. So that sort of information that's contained in the label. I've actually given us a bit of background in terms of how a consumer chooses a product. We really need to think about why animal welfare is coming to the forefront. Why is it really in the spotlight, and why does that seem to be increasing as we move forward? A lot of people think that a bit of an anti-meat agenda is creeping in at the moment. So there seems to be a lot more meat focus on how animals are produced, but a lot of the coming out of animation type organisations are we shouldn't be producing or eating animals at all, and there is encouragement for people to move away from meat and actually look for more non-meat alternatives. And if you look on the National Service website in the UK, there's even an anti-meat agenda creeping in there where people have been encouraged to move away from meat and find sources of iron in other non-meat products. So we're living in a community at the moment that has got pretty first world expectations. So even the whole idea of animals being slaughtered for food is one that they are not pretty comfortable with. And as an industry, I think it's important that we can talk openly and transparently about how animals are produced and processed, and actually, yeah, we are killing animals. We are in the business of killing animals. We can't hide that away. And I think summarised by the sentence at the bottom there, animals were harmed in the production of food. no matter if we show you best practice, it's still quite confronting because we are slaughtering a living animal. So that's one thing that the industry needs to do. They need to be sort of more open and transparent about that. Another thing that we need to do as an industry as well is we need to make sure that we're not defending the indefensible. So we are identifying poor practice and are changing practices to make sure that we are beyond reproach and we are confident that our industry is working to the best standards available. This image on this slide here is one that we call YouTube test. It's really, are we comfortable in the practices that we are using in our processing plants and our abattoirs? Would we be comfortable for them to be on YouTube? And this particular picture on the slide there, this is actually something that has been quite recently on the internet. This is actually produced by Animal Liberation, and it's an open forum for people to look at abattoirs under their investigation. So there's a number of slaughterhouses on there. There's high definition photographs, there's lots of video that's been obtained from hidden cameras, and it's really trying to expose consumers or the community to what actually happens within a processing plant. But bear in mind, it's an animal liberation view of what happens in the processing plant rather than an industry view of what happens in the processing plant. Okay. And because like the internet and the fact that we've got so much access to social media at the moment, I mean, you get information 24/7, you can Google things, we've got media exposes on things like Facebook and Instagram. So this sort of is freely available to whoever wants it. And the animal liberation groups have really taken advantage of this at the moment. And it can create a massive response in a very short time. You know, a picture that's put on the internet in the morning can create a situation that is manageable by the afternoon. And this is what happened over in Tasmania. This is only a couple of weeks ago, where our local domestic works over here had some 4 days of hidden footage taken. It was on the internet. And the very same day, we obviously on the left hand there, tailbacks, which is known in Tasmania, if anybody knows Tasmania, all the way across the Tasman Bridge. We had protests on the bridge saying, stop eating meat, why is this happening in Australian abattoirs? So a huge focus on that sort of information and spread very, very quickly. So welfare is very much in the spotlight. And that some activist websites at the moment are actually publishing personal such as people's names, operatives' names, addresses of abattoirs and locations and maps of abattoirs, and encouraging people to get this information themselves, to actually go out and see how their food is being produced. So we've been exposed to a level that we've never seen before, and we can't get away from that. And I think that it's always going to be on the increase. The unfortunate thing at the moment is that sort of exposure is pretty much controlled by the activists. You know, we need to respond by being proactive rather than reactive to this sort of information. And that's really the challenge that is presented to the retailers as well. So when we think as an industry, we've got a whole raft of retail standards that we need to meet. They're trying to defend themselves and provide assurances to their consumers that we've considered and we are managing animal welfare. So that's sort of the extreme nature of things. If we look at more scientifically controlled consumer studies, then it's almost reflecting a similar sort of feeling towards animal welfare. this is just a summary of a study called the Eurobarometer. There's a consumer study